Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel where we cover all things tech. My name is Davis, and today we are going to be looking at something that's quite possibly the smoothest and most attractive 16-inch laptop I have ever seen. Yep, as soon as I set my eyes on this, I was absolutely and utterly gobsmacked at how gorgeous it was, especially considering that it's marketed at being a bit of a gaming laptop as well. I don't know about you, call me out of touch, but in my mind, this is what I call a gaming laptop. It looks like this. This was the family Dell XPS M1730 from 2007, I think, and I think that we can see that it's rather ghastly. Not only is it completely massive, but it's got lights and colors absolutely everywhere. It's made of cheap, nasty plastic. I think the hinge is actually broken, and despite being plastic, it is basically heavier than the moon. So to be able to see something like this on my desk, well, it was quite the surprise. And of course, this is the 2024 version of the ASUS ROG Zephyrus G16. So I've got a pretty basic version over here. Hello, Windows. Oh, it doesn't like me when I'm smiling. So I've got a pretty basic version here with the new Intel Core Ultra 7 processor, 4060 graphics, and the IPS display, which costs an RRP price of 3,499 Australian dollars. But even so, this is quite possibly one of my favorite laptops that I've ever used. It's comprehensively brilliant in just about every single way, apart from one kind of major issue. Can you guess what that is? Well, that's what we are going to find out in this video. So if you enjoy tech videos like this one, then be sure to give me a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. As usual, if you've got any questions about this particular computer, feel free to comment below and I will get to them as soon as I can. And this video is brought to you by the UltraHuman Ring Air. So it's very rare for me to still be using a piece of tech after the review period is over. But this is exactly what I've been doing with this smart ring, because with the software updates, it is just getting better and better. So for those of you who saw my review video, you might remember that I said that while it was brilliant at tracking your health for things like resting heart rate, general activity, and especially sleep, it wasn't so good at workout. In such scenarios, I would just far prefer to use my Apple Watch. But with these latest updates, your Apple Watch workout data gets sent straight into the UltraHuman app. So there's finally more interoperability between Apple Health and UltraHuman. So you can finally wear your Apple Watch when it's ideal and your ring for other situations. With this ring, you can wear your fancy automatic watch instead of your Apple Watch to dinner and still be able to track your health. And also, unlike a certain competitor, there is no subscription needed to unlock all the features either. You can use my code Davis10 through the link in the description to save 10% off your UltraHuman Ring Air, and I will continue to give further updates about my experience in future videos. And let's start with the hardware design. So you get a choice between the platinum white color, which I think is this one, and also the Eclipse Grey. And Eclipse Grey is obviously what we've got here, and I'd say that it is absolutely gorgeous. It looks very similar to Apple's new Space Black color, but it is a tiny bit lighter, and for some reason I find it a lot less prone to fingerprints and smudges as well, although they are still visible as it's quite a dark color. And like the MacBook, the body of this laptop is an anodized aluminum unibody, and it is absolutely gorgeous. In fact, it's so gorgeous that it's quite possibly the smartest looking creator gaming laptop that I've ever seen. It's just 1.49 millimeters in depth, which is absolutely incredible, and it weighs just 1.85 kilograms. That is extremely impressive for a 16-inch laptop, and that also means that it's both thinner and lighter than the equivalent MacBook Pro that's become a little bit chunky with the switch to Apple Silicon. No other 16-inch laptop with this level of power has fitted into my bag quite so easily, and despite the thinness, the build quality is just unmatched. I think that actually for the first time in a long time, this build quality is up there with a MacBook Pro. The aluminium finish just feels so incredible to the touch. It's so solid. There are no creaks whatsoever. There is no flex inside this keyboard as well. In fact, the only thing on this laptop that feels somewhat cheap is this slash lighting on the top of the lid. It feels like that it's made of a very thin piece of metal, barely hanging on with a bit of glue. But apart from that, the build quality is really quite unmatched in this class. So on the top, we've got the slash lighting, which is able to animate in a variety of different ways, and the amount of options you have is both baffling and rather cool. So you've got a lot of different themes to choose from, like you've got glitch, data stream, neo retro, and more. Let's go with glitch, let's say. And then inside each theme, you've also got different options like sonic match, which I think matches the sound. You've got bounce and slash, just tons of different options for just this one little light. But well, I wouldn't say that this has been especially useful other than perhaps telling you that the laptop is charging. I'd say it's kind of cool, and I'm sure that you can use it to blind whoever is sitting opposite you with random light flashes, if that is what you want to do. On the bottom corner over here, we've got a very subtle etched logo, and overall I think that the lid is incredibly sleek and minimalist. And let's look at the other side now. So the screen over here is a 16:10 aspect ratio, which is nice, and luckily it's rather resistant against reflections as well, and it's got relatively thin bezels, although they aren't amazing. And beside the 1080p webcam, which is pretty good by the way, there's also a Windows Hello IR blaster, which is fantastic to see. I do love seeing those. I've been using a lot of laptops with either face recognition like this one or fingerprint readers, and if you ask me, the face recognition is what I prefer every single time. I miss it a lot every time I use a MacBook. So underneath the display, we've also got a very subtle logo. You can barely see it. It says ROG Zephyrus in that gamerish font. And now we get to the keyboard, and just wow, this is quite possibly my favorite keyboard that I've ever used on a laptop. I adore how this keyboard does not have a numpad. A lot of 16-inch laptops feel like that they need to somehow squeeze a numpad in here, but I basically never use them. They always make you sort of type weirdly and off-center, so it's really good to see that it's not here. Sorry if you love those. The keycaps on this keyboard though are very square, and apparently they are 12% larger than normal. So I guess that's good at least. There's 1.7 millimeters of travel, which feels like the right amount to me. And I've tried a lot of keyboards in my time. Most of them I've liked, but this keyboard I honestly absolutely love. Apart from the font over here, which is a little bit too gamerish for my taste, there is absolutely nothing that I would change. The spacing, the material, the action, the sound, everything here is top notch and extremely satisfying. I've not used a keyboard that I prefer to this one. I also love how there are a few extra buttons on the top of the keyboard, which is cool. Like you've got your volume, your mute mic, and also your Armory button that takes you straight to the Armory Gate Crate app. Also cool with the keyboard is the RGB lighting. I mean, I usually just have it set to a solid color. Let's go crazy and go for this seafoam color. Wow. But if you are the sort of person who loves wearing rainbow colors everywhere, there is a rainbow option for you too. It's pretty fun to play with, but not only is the keyboard fantastic, but so surprisingly is the power button, which is just absolutely lovely. It's got a very sharp click to it. Just listen to this. Wow, and it's made of glass as well, so it feels really high quality. To be fair, they probably could have fit a fingerprint reader in there as well, but at least we've got face recognition, so that doesn't really matter. And beside the keyboard as well, we've got the speakers. And oh my god, they sound absolutely incredible. If you've always wished for your PC laptop to have speakers that match that of a new MacBook, then here you go. There are 6 speakers in here, and it sounds deep, it sounds clear, and really full for a laptop speaker array. And it's every bit as good as a MacBook's, except not quite as loud, but the sound quality that they provide is definitely up there. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so just to round up, it's got a better design than the MacBook Pro, it's got the same build quality as a MacBook, a better keyboard, and the speakers are basically just as good. But here is where most PC laptops struggle, and it is the touchpad. And with this one, I would say they are 95% of the way there. Firstly, it is absolutely massive. It both looks and feels fantastic. I believe it's made of glass, but don't quote me on that, but it feels like roughly the same material as the MacBook. It's very smooth and silky to feel. Multi-touch gestures just work fantastically. There's plenty of space there, and it's very responsive as well. And overall, I feel that this is quite possibly the best touchpad I've ever used on a Windows laptop. However, there is one slight problem. It's a dive board mechanism, and while that feels very satisfying to press if you press it in the right position, as in on the bottom, it's got really nice dampening, so it's very satisfying. But unfortunately, it just takes way too much effort if you are pressing anywhere in, let's say, the top 2/3 of the trackpad. And since it's very large, reaching down to the bottom can be a little bit difficult at times. I would personally love to have seen some sort of a force touch trackpad like on a MacBook or some Dell models, but even with that in mind, I still think that this is one of the best trackpads I've ever used on a Windows product. And you probably don't need to bring a mouse with you everywhere you go with this laptop. So now you might be wondering, what is the port situation like? Well, I'm sure you'd be glad to hear that it is rather good. Firstly, let's look on the left side. Firstly, we've got your DC port in here. They call this the ASUS Slim Power Jack, which is not a very interesting name, but it's not reversible, and it's not the easiest connector to use. So let's move on from there. We've also got an HDMI 2.1 port over here, which is great if you like powering your 4K 120Hz monitors. Over here, we've got the best port of the lot, a Thunderbolt port that can support power input as well, which is fantastic and not a given in the class. So I'm very impressed with that. It's really good for a one cable monitor solution. We've also got a USB 3.2 port here, which is great for gaming peripherals and really not that much else these days. And we've also got a headphone/mic port. On the other side, we've got another USB-A port. We've got a USB-C 3.2, and we've also got a full-size SD card reader, which is fantastic. I really shouldn't have to celebrate that there is an SD card reader here, but for some reason, a lot of laptops have been replacing full-size SD card slots with micro ones these days. Like, what am I supposed to do with the micro? It could only be possibly useful for GoPro enthusiasts, but even then, they've got nice wireless solutions these days, so perhaps not even then. So basically, the ports are good, but maybe I could cheekily swap one of the USB-A ports for a USB-C Thunderbolt, but you know, that is fine. So on the bottom of the laptop, which I'm sure is the most exciting part, we've got some very long, skinny feet. And we've also got some absolutely massive cooling ducts. They are ridiculous in size. And also, I don't know if you can see, there appear to be some LED lights by the fans. So I'm not sure if these are being used to light the keyboard and this is just a byproduct of that, or if these LEDs were specifically placed here to light up the fans that you can only see when the laptop is upside down. But I guess that's kind of cool at least. I don't know. So let's move on to something a little bit more useful now, and that is the screen. And this is the somewhat weird part, because at first I thought that I was getting an OLED. All of the marketing material led me to believe that I was getting a 2.5K 240Hz OLED display, and I was very much looking forward to trying that out. Even the website for this laptop, specifically not the OLED model, well, look over here, it mentions an OLED display. So I'm sure that you can understand my confusion. If you look over here as well, for example, for tech specs, it just takes me to the model where there's just IPS displays. You can't get an OLED from one of these two models. So you can imagine my surprise when I first turned this laptop on and I thought, oh, these blacks are kind of gray. And ooh, is that a little bit of IPS light bleed on the side of that panel? And yeah, after some more research, I realized that the base two models of this laptop have IPS displays, in Australia at least. Whoever was making the website probably just did a quick copy and paste job and then just went to the pub after. And however, after the initial shock, I'm actually pretty happy with this display. Firstly, it's a fantastic aspect ratio. I love the extra vertical space that a 16:10 screen gives you, and the resolution, while isn't amazing, is still fairly decent. It's 1600 by 2560 pixels, so while that's closer to a 14 rather than a 16-inch MacBook Pro, you can still sort of see the individual pixels if you look very, very closely, and that all fades into the background when you realize that this is quite possibly the smoothest screen that you've ever seen on a laptop. It is crazy. It's 240 Hertz. It's kind of incredible. Being a bit more of a content creator rather than gamer, I admit that I sort of initially scoffed at the idea of a 240 Hertz display on a laptop. I mean, isn't 120 enough? But after using this laptop for a bit, nothing I've used feels quite as smooth as this laptop. Just when scrolling web pages and normal mundane stuff like that, it makes Windows 11 look and feel absolutely incredible. I'm sure it helps with gaming as well, but I digress. This has the ROG Nebula certification as well, and it's supposed to mean that it's got specs like 240 Hz, NVIDIA G-Sync up to 500 nits of SDR brightness, mini LED or OLED, 1100 nits of HDR, and 100% of DCI-P3 color gamut. And while I don't have the equipment to test those claims, I am, let's just say, a little bit unconvinced. I think that the marketing people are getting a little bit confused, and the term is just getting a little bit more cloudy every day. Firstly, I'm pretty sure that this does not have a mini LED display. The blacks look very IPS grey to me, which I mean isn't great, but it's ultimately fine. But it does make me question the contrast ratio claim a little bit as well. And the brightness also didn't appear to be quite so bright initially, until I realized that by default that it actually limits the brightness when you're on battery power. So in a situation where you need a really bright screen, like when you're outside, it chooses to limit it, which is just a little bit of a weird decision. But after changing the settings, it does appear to be around 500 nits, which is pretty good for the price, and up there with computers like the MacBook Pro. And reflections are also pretty well contained, a far cry from some of the ridiculously reflective OLED screens I've tested recently, and the color reproduction also looks very, very good. And that would be important because of its 100% DCI-P3 color gamut and Pantone validation. And here is my controversial take. In day-to-day use, I dare say that I prefer IPS displays over OLED, because no matter how good an OLED display gets, their whites, which make up for most of my computer use, just look a little bit weird off-center, shifting hues as you move your head. So when you move your head a little bit, you can see the white hues just shift in a very weird way. You don't get that on an IPS display. An IPS display just looks better most of the time because of that. And there's also no worry of burn-in as well, which is just a pretty big thing for me. And it's also useful to know that I don't think that this screen can easily adjust between different refresh rates during typical use. So when on battery, you are either always on 60 Hz or 240. And when you're on 240, it does kill your battery a lot faster than if you're on 60. So that's up to you. You can either have a normal laggy computer that lasts a bit longer, or a smooth experience that you paid for, but it doesn't last long at all. So essentially what I'm trying to say, that this is a very good screen, but perhaps not the best I've ever seen, but the refresh rate really is incredible. And talking about incredible as well is the performance. And this is the first time that I've tried out the new Intel Core Ultra line of processors, and this is the Ultra 7 166H, which is the 16 cores with a base frequency of 1.8 GHz and can boost up to 4.8 GHz. And it's also matched with the NVIDIA GTX 4060 laptop GPU with 8 GB of memory, and there is 16 GB of RAM and 1 TB of storage. And this thing is pretty much a screamer. On Geekbench 6, results were fairly impressive. It's got a single core score of 2342 and a multi-score of 13,470. That is only slightly down from the 13th generation i9 processors that I've tested on some other laptops like MSI Stealth 16, Mercedes AMG edition. It is a little bit less than the M3 Max MacBook Pro, which is at around $3,200 and $21,000 respectively, but again, M3 Max MacBook Pro is twice the price. And on battery power, you aren't losing too much performance either, which was a massive shock to me. The numbers were only slightly down at 2237 and 12,397 respectively. Now that is the first time on a performance-oriented Windows laptop where I've seen the CPU performance not take a cliff dive when it's on battery power. It is quite incredible. It's sort of a similar story with the GPU as well. So it got an OpenCL score of 93,574 when plugged into power, and 81,571 on battery power. And this means that when on battery power, it's still graphically more powerful than my binned M2 Max MacBook Pro, which is super. And for those of you who are interested, I've been told that Cinebench is a thing that I should use. I got a CPU Cinebench R23 multi-score of almost 16,000, which is actually slightly more than the 14,000-ish of my binned M2 Max MacBook Pro, which means that performance is simply stupendous for video editing. And for the first time ever on one of these laptops, there is no lag even when I take the laptop off power, as you can see here. I am running this on full resolution and I can still preview this no problem at all. It does lag a little bit when I try to color grade on the fly, but as you can see, it is still absolutely possible. And I can skip to here earlier on in the timeline, and it still plays normally like so. That's pretty impressive. And if you like to play games, it's pretty good as well. Here you can see me play the new Forza Motorsport at ultra settings, 1600p resolution, in the rain, on the Nürburgring. And you can see that while it starts off at around 30 frames a second, it quickly takes a cliff dive. So I changed it to high settings instead, and it pretty much keeps to quite a steady 60 frames a second, which is pretty impressive. I think this might also be because of the latest Forza update, but the game overall plays a lot smoother than it has appeared on other laptops. And here is the new Persona 3 Reload game as well. As you can see, I am running throughout the school and it looks perfect at 120 frames a second at full settings. And you might be glad to know as well that cooling is pretty amazing. It's got a couple of second generation Arcflow fans, some models have 3, and with the ducts down here that we saw earlier that were illuminated, while the laptop can get loud and warm to the touch, thermal throttling on this model at least has not been an issue for me at all. And of course you can adjust almost everything that you could want with the performance and heat management inside the Armoury Crate application, which is literally just a button away. It's just this button here. It's very easy to use and it shows you basically everything. And now we come to my only real issue with this computer. And can you guess what it is? Because it is the battery life. Now I don't know about you, but I was really hoping that these new Intel Ultra processors would really change things for me, because battery life has always been an issue on Intel based gaming and creator laptops. And for me at least, this is no different unfortunately. I've tried a million different profiles and usage scenarios, and the most I've managed to eke out of this thing by doing the absolute minimum, like one note and just a few internet tabs open, is around 6 hours. I'm sorry, but if I was doing that little on my MacBook Pro, I could easily get 14, 15 hours. This is simply not enough to get you through a typical workday. And when you even just hint at doing something more intensive, like, I don't know, just having the Adobe Creative Cloud Launcher open, then whoosh, it goes all the way down to 3 hours. And that is basically my average when I'm using this thing. During my typical use, while I can get 6, 7, or 8 hours from a MacBook, I just get 3 on this. And when I really push it, 90 minutes or less is not out of the question. And when considering that this has a massive 90 watt-hour battery, there's not much that ASUS could have done to increase that. So I'm afraid that this laptop still only appeals to those who spend most of their time in the office or at home and not mobile warriors like how I pretend to describe myself as. So in conclusion, what do I think of the ASUS ROG Zephyrus G16? Well, honestly, if you don't go out much, just buy it. as I said at the beginning, this is just about the perfect laptop for me. It's gorgeous to look at, it is extremely well made, the screen is good, the speakers are great, it's really fast, doesn't get too hot, and it's also pretty good value for money. I mean, 3,500 Australian dollars is not cheap, but for what you are getting, it is really good. But however, battery life is a bit of a concern. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and also please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. If you have any questions, also be sure to comment down below, and I will try to get to you as soon as I can. And until next time, toodaloo.